This is the Samsung S25 Ultra, and this is the iPhone 16 Pro. The S25 Ultra has been catching some heat since it's been released, but I've got to say, since I've been using it, I've been pretty impressed. See if you can tell which camera got which shot. Camera A has more of a mirrorless look where the skin tones look more realistic and less polished or plasticky, whereas camera B lifts all of the midtones in camera. Just look at the Luma waveform with both of these shots and you can see what's happening with the midtones on camera B. But when it comes to using the front-facing camera at night, camera B comes out on top being a little bit less muddy, but not by too much. But take a look at this backlit shot. You can see that I have better control over the sunlight and the sky color when looking at camera B. But everything else, like the color of the bleachers and the field goal, looks more true to life with camera A. But low light shooting with the 1x camera is where I really love to test these cameras out to see how they perform. We can see a distinct color difference in the shot, not only in the sky, but also the white balance. Camera A way outperforms camera B in not only performance, but also color accuracy and noise reduction. And I just love the sky color of camera A so much more. This video is not sponsored by Samsung or by Apple. In fact, this video does not have a sponsorship at all. I left project files of both of these cameras in the description in case you would like to download the footage and try them out in your editors. Some of the footage includes the shots that you just saw and 8K with the Samsung and log with both cameras. I'll leave a link to that project file pack in the description. You can say thanks by subscribing and liking this video. Today, we're going to look at both cameras, how they perform in real world situations like low light shooting with skin tones. We're going to compare their stabilization when we're outside. We're going to see how realistic their colors actually are, then jump into an arcade for some low light shots. We will compare Samsung's 8K versus Apple's 4K. We'll look at both cameras' log footage side by side and grade it, and we'll look at how their wide angle lenses perform. We're going to do some photography in an uncontrolled lighting environment. We'll test out their blur modes when shooting in video. We'll do some vertical shooting, do some green screen work, and we'll see how their telephoto cameras look. All right, you ready? Let's go. The Samsung S25 Ultra starts at $1,299 US, and that's for the 256 gigabyte version. The iPhone 16 Pro starts at $1,099 US, and that's also for the 256 gigabyte card. The S25 was released in February of 2025, and the iPhone 16 Pro was released in September of 2024. If you're interested in getting the film look with either of these two cameras, I made 5 LUTs that you can apply to your log footage. I'll leave those LUTs in the description. From a usability standpoint, if you plan to use either of these cameras without cases, be careful because they don't have the best grips in the world, which makes them have a tendency to slip out of your hand. That's why I highly recommend picking up phone cases no matter which one of these two cameras you decide to buy. The S25 Ultra has a 200 megapixel main wide camera, a 50 megapixel ultra wide camera, a 50 megapixel telephoto camera with a 5x zoom, a 10 megapixel telephoto camera with a 3x zoom, and a 12 megapixel front-facing camera. The iPhone 16 Pro has a 48 megapixel main camera, a 48 megapixel ultra-wide camera, and a 12 megapixel telephoto lens. When it comes to exposure tools, the S25's native camera app has a lot more, including control over your ISO, your shutter speed, your focus, and your white balance while you're shooting video, whereas you need to download the Final Cut camera app with the iPhone in order to get in control of your focus and your white balance. Both cameras have USB-C ports on the bottom for transferring your photos and videos along with charging. Both cameras do have side buttons on the sides, but the iPhone 16 Pro has buttons on both sides, which means if you're hooking it up to a tripod, you're going to need to be careful because if you squeeze both sides, you may end up calling emergency services by accident. I set both cameras up side by side and I wanted to see what their digital blur modes, which one looked more realistic. When looking at this comparison, I think the S25 has a little bit more of a realistic looking blur than the iPhone 16 Pro. Something that I've noticed while I've been putting this comparison together is the S25 Ultra has almost a mirrorless camera look, whereas the iPhone 16 Pro kind of looks like a smartphone, if that makes any sense. This is really apparent when we look at the skin tones. Because both cameras have fixed apertures, I wasn't seeing that much of a difference when I did these autofocus tests. I found both autofocus systems to be about the same. For photography, I didn't do this in a laboratory, I just went out and shot photos like anybody would, and I think they both take relatively similar looking photos. Both of them have the same amount of detail to me, and I can't really tell a difference in most situations. I may see a difference in color temperatures, but that's just to do with their auto white balance. The iPhone seems to have a warmer color than the Samsung, and looking at these shots, you can choose which one of these two colors cameras you like better. I personally think the Samsung is more realistic looking and true to life than the iPhone 16 Pro. However, the iPhone tends to be more accurate when it comes to auto white balance shooting, and if you don't get your white balance correct, none of the colors are going to look right. I also did a sharpness test using the 200 megapixels out of the Samsung S25 Ultra to see how much sharper it actually is compared to the 48 megapixels that you get with the main camera on the iPhone. And when I scale in 5000%, you can really see a big difference between both of these cameras' sharpness and which one outperforms the other ones. And in this case, the Samsung definitely outperformed the iPhone. For these green screen shots that I got with both of these cameras, you can see that there's different shades of green between both of their shots. And because I've been doing this for a while, I like the green that I get with the iPhone a little bit better than I do with the Samsung. It makes it a lot easier when it comes to keying. Factors like lighting and white balance settings definitely are an influence when you're doing green screens, but the final output and keying process really depends on how well your green screen is lit evenly. But to put it simply, the 16 Pro did a better job for me when it came to green screen. When I did this macro shot, I could also see a pretty big difference in white balance, which I found the iPhone to have a little bit more of a realistic look than the S25 Ultra. If I did not have a dedicated camera, then I could absolutely use either of these cameras to get some of these nice slider product shots like you see here. And you can see that the iPhone has a little bit more of a blur in the background than the Samsung. And this is not using the blur mode, just the normal 1x cameras. I also made sure to do some vertical shooting with both of these phones for people who are interested in doing short form content. And I didn't see that much of a difference when it came to their image quality. If anything, I see a difference in color science. And again, a little bit more of a blur with the iPhone in the background compared to the S25 Ultra. I did notice that the sky color in the S25 Ultra has more of a purple hue and the iPhone has more of a bluish hue. I don't know if one has a more real look than the other, but I would say the S25 looks more cinematic, straight out of the camera to my eyes. Now I'm gonna test out 4 different things all at the same time. Number 1 is audio and how both cameras' audios sound. Number 2 is how their exposure transitions from a shaded area to a lit area. Third is how both cameras look when we're vlogging at arm's length. And then finally, what the skin tones look like. And here is that test. We are doing a vlog test with the Samsung S25 Ultra. We're actually gonna do an exposure transition to see what happens when I go from shadow to brightness when the sun's hitting me, and see how fast and easily this phone can handle that switch, and also how clear the images are. I'm using the front-facing camera, and I also have the microphone set to omnidirectional. Doing an iPhone 16 Pro test, vlog test. We are actually going to jump from the shaded area to a brighter spot where the sun's hitting my face to see how this phone controls that exposure transition using the front-facing camera, and we're gonna also test out the audio. And another test that I've gotten quite a few requests about is doing a front-facing camera with both of these cameras at night. And you can see that both shots look terribly muddy. But if anything, the iPhone pulls out on top a little bit like we saw at the beginning of the video, but it's not by much. The S25 Ultra has Samsung Log and the Apple iPhone has Apple Log. I found that the Apple Log was a lot easier to work with in post-production when I was doing some color grading, but both log shots work great, especially if you're trying to match colors with other cameras that you're using in the same video. Also, this clip of the gym was shot in the same duration for both of these clips, and the S25's log file was 275 megabytes, whereas the clip using Apple Log was 1.71 gigabytes. So if you plan on using Apple Log, make sure to record to an external SSD so your memory doesn't fill up super fast, and then also have a good place to store all of that footage afterwards. But I also wanted to test out the 8K versus the 4K on the iPhone. So when I switched the S25 Ultra over to 8K and I kept the iPhone at its 4K resolution, we went outside and we got a shot like this, and at first sight, it doesn't look like it has much of a difference. But when we scale in 5000% and we do some pixel peeping, that's when you can really start to see how the S25 is sharper. There's a lot more fringe going on that white pole, which tells me they may have something going on like the Google Pixel 9 Pro has, which is an upscaling using AI to get it to 8K. But either way, the S25 Ultra is sharper than the iPhone. Now, with that being said, in this particular instance, I don't think using 8K with the S25 Ultra is going to provide that much of an image quality difference at the cost of the file size because it's gonna double in what you get with 4K. But you have it if you need it. In a lot of different situations, the image quality was indistinguishable if we were out in uncontrolled lighting environments, so I wanted to get to the heart of the colors out of both of these cameras. So I threw them up against each other in front of this color checker. By looking at these colors, you can tell that the auto white balance tends to be a little bit more cool with the S25 Ultra and a little bit more warm with the 16 Pro. That could just be these interior shots and the way that they were lit, but where I really start to see a difference on the color checker is in the greens and in the blues. In low light environments like this, there isn't much of a difference for someone who's just doing these types of shots in the low light hours. We really start to see a big difference when we get neon shots like this. We have a lot more of a halation effect going on with the S25 Ultra, which in some ways I can see that neon light almost bleeding into the image, whereas the iPhone is able to separate that neon light from the rest of the frame. In my opinion, I like the way the iPhone looks better in this shot. Skin tones in low light situations is also a common scenario that some people may find themselves in. And I found that the S25 Ultra struggles to hold on to that auto white balance, whereas the iPhone locks into that white balance. It looks a lot better in my opinion, and it's able to lift those midtones in the camera itself, which gives the appearance of having a better image quality. Now, I would prefer to be able to turn the midtones lift off in camera, but as of right now, we cannot. And here we can see a lot of the same thing. The S25 Ultra struggles to hold on to that auto white balance, and the skin tones just look off. But with the iPhone 16 Pro in low light, you can see that the skin tones hold up a lot better. And here I'm using the rear facing camera compared to the front facing camera like I did when we were outside. And you can see that the front and the rear facing camera on the iPhone does a lot better with skin tones in low light conditions like this. Now, when we jump outside and we do some night shooting with both of these cameras, the S25 Ultra outperforms the iPhone. And I'm not 100% sure why this is. If you know, please let me know in the comments. But take a look at this train shot and how realistic the S25 Ultra looks compared to the 16 Pro. When I flipped both cameras around and shot the train coming from a different direction, we could really see a difference in how these cameras perform when they're shooting lights in low light. I think the S25 Ultra has more of a starburst effect around the lights, whereas the 16 Pro gives more of a flare, which is what I prefer. I also noticed when we're shooting in night like this, if you're ever shooting into the light, the image will become predominantly more muddy. So just be careful of that, whether or not you get either of these phones. When the sun came out and I was shooting in the normal 4K 24, we see a lot of the same thing going on with this shot that we've seen with other shots. Whereas the 16 Pro lifts up the midtones, which gives the Samsung a realer or more cinematic look in my opinion. I wanted to test out the dynamic range also using the standard color profile, not log. Just wanted to see what they look like and how well they could hold up in this harsh lighting environment. And you can see both cameras did a pretty good job, but I tend to like the S25 Ultra better because there's more contrast in the shadows. Also, I got these backlit shots so we can see how both camera sensors react when the cameras are being backlit. Both cameras were on the same tripod and at the same height, and you can see that there's a lot more of a sun roll off with the S25 Ultra, whereas with the iPhone, it's able to control that light a lot better. However, with that being said, once we turn our eyes down towards the bleachers area, both cameras' images look about the same in image quality. If anything, I noticed that the S25 Ultra has a realer to life look, meaning the sensor is able to handle this backlighting shot a lot better than the iPhone. I also looked at how both cameras interpolate the actual sun itself, and from these shots, you can see that the color of the sun with the S25 Ultra has more of a purple hue, and the 16 Pro has a little bit more of a yellow hue. This is in the eye of the beholder. You tell me which one you like better and why. As you've seen up until now, a lot of times the sky colors look pretty close, but there is a distinct difference. And when I'm actually out there looking at the sky with my own eyes, the S25 Ultra has a more real-to-life look. And when I look at shots like this, I tend to think that the S25 Ultra has a more realistic look than the iPhone, which does a lot of computational saturation and sharpness in the phone itself. I mean, they both do it, but the iPhone does it a lot more, producing almost a fake looking final product. And I prefer the Samsung shot in its image quality and its colors because I think that it has a realer to life look. I couldn't see a big difference between stabilization with both of these cameras. I think they both performed about the same. I may have gotten a little bit wobbly while I was walking up here, but for the most part, I would say they tied in stabilization. All right, let's wrap this thing up. So we pitted the Samsung S25 Ultra against the iPhone 16 Pro, and what did we find? Well, right off the bat, price-wise, the S25 Ultra is more expensive than the iPhone, but not by much. When we looked at their body forms and size, they're both sleek, but you'll want to get a case because you don't want either of these to crack or break if you drop them. The Samsung throws a lot of megapixels and lenses at you, while the iPhone brings its own game, especially if you dive into the Final Cut camera app or if you use Apple Log. Now, if you're an everyday shooter, they're surprisingly close. You're not gonna see a massive difference if you just go out, open up the box, and start shooting with them. But when you start to dig into the details, the colors become a big differentiator. The Samsung tends to be more realistic, true to life look, while the iPhone leans more towards warmer tones and a bit more saturation, and it also lifts up its midtones. If you want to print your photos or you're a pixel peeper, then the S25 Ultra would be the way to go because of its 200 megapixels. Then there's the color science, which really comes down to personal taste. Which green do you like better? Which sky color do you like better? If you like skin tones better, then you'd have to go with the S25 Ultra, in my opinion. If you want to shoot only at night and you're not shooting into lights, go with the S25 Ultra. But the iPhone often nails white balance with skin tones, especially when you are in low light conditions. So if you are a low light condition shooter who wants to do skin tones, then the 16 Pro would be your camera. If you think you're gonna buy the Samsung S25 Ultra because it has 8K, honestly, it's not a game changer. Stick with the 4K with the iPhone. The S25 Ultra has a bit more contrast. It handles backlit situations a lot better, and the iPhone controls sun roll off a lot better. And stabilization, they're pretty much about the same. Ultimately, it's up to you. If it was up to me, I would probably go with the S25 Ultra, but unfortunately I have a whole ecosystem of Apple, so I'm gonna stick with the 16 Pro and use this camera just to help me get memories and use my dedicated cameras to get more controlled exposure shots. So that's my comparison between the S25 Ultra and the iPhone 16 Pro. I hope you enjoyed it. Please let me know which one of these two cameras you like better and why. I'll see you on the next video. I'm Joe, and this is the Film Alliance.